Jan Miczaika co-founded 2005 Hitmeister, which had when he left 60 employees and got later sold to Real. Since 2007, Jan has been an angel investor in almost 20 companies, and in 2010, after he left Hitmeister, he joined Wooga as COO. They had 30 employees during that time and grew up to 300 employees. Since 2017, he works as venture capitalist at Holtzbrinck Ventures. And now let's start the podcast. He is Florian from 99 Startups, and I'm today here with Jan.
Hi, hello.
Jan, you have quite an impressive track record. So can you tell us about the main difference of co-founding Hitmeister, working for Wooga, and then later starting in the venture business?
Yeah, sure. So, it's been a long ride. I co-founded Hitmeister, I think it was now 15, 16 years ago. And when we started, we came straight out of university, 3 people in one office, no money, really scrappy. And we did a ton of mistakes, but also learned a lot on the way. And then I joined Wooga when there were about 30 people. So it was already a good sized company. Hitmeister was about 60 when I left. Wooga was 30 and then grew to 300. And so while at Hitmeister I was actually doing a lot, I was sometimes writing code and fixing servers and installing computers and all that stuff. At Wooga, a lot more already had been built, and it was more about scaling, about hiring people, setting up teams, all this stuff. And now at Holtzbrinck, it's very different. Now I don't actually, I try and support our entrepreneurs where possible, but in the end it's about screening the market, finding cool founders, interesting projects, figuring out where the fund can invest. So it's on the one hand, it's super interesting because I see tons and tons of startups, cool founders, great ideas. On the other hand, I don't get to do anything anymore.
So would you say that is the previous journey always helped you for the next one?
Yes, definitely. And I think what was interesting is when I was at Wooga, I already started doing angel investments. So I did about 15 or so angel investments. So I learned a bit about investing money, and I'd even say out of a perspective, my career almost looks planned, even if it wasn't.
So how happened the transitions? So did you just look for new challenges, or why didn't you just found the next company after Hitmeister?
Yeah, so I invested in Wooga as an angel, and at that point, then Wooga was maybe 2 years old, and the CEO Jens was looking for someone to kind of extend the leadership team. And Jens is brilliant at product and very, very good at building company. The other co-founder, Philip, is a very, very good CTO. And the idea was for me to come in and to start doing the whole commercial side. And what I found really interesting was the possibility to see a company grow from. At that time, it was very clear the company would go off like a rocket. And for me to be able to see how it is to manage a company of 300 people-ish, that was extremely interesting and very tempting.
So how big was Hitmeister as you sold it?
When it was sold, I think around 80 people. 80 when people. I lived around 60.
Okay. So, and... So you were more the manager on the inside of Wooga. Mm-hmm. So what would you say was the key learnings to be a manager in 300? You growed it also. What was the main difference on the beginning, and then the main points on the beginning, what you focused on, and then on the end?
Well, I think it's really important to be aware of which stage you're in, what your problems are, and then to fix them kind of one by one. And because there's a great book by a Google head of HR, on all the stuff Google does in HR, but there's no way you can do that in a 300-person company, and definitely not in a 10-person startup. And so at Wooga, the journey was the first thing was to raise our B series, the big round of money. And then I spent a lot of time, for example, setting up HR. And then we hired a head of HR who took over that. And then I moved on to what in gaming is called publishing. And so it really was an iteration. And to what I like is experimenting with things. You know, should we do daily stand-ups? Yes, okay. But what happens when you hit 10 people, 30 people, 50 people? When do you stop? Do you do weeklies? Do you have the leads in? Who do you involve? What's the reporting? All these things. What I often liked is finding concepts somewhere, blogs, other startups and so on, testing them, seeing if it helps. And if it does, keep on. And if not, stop. And so to me, growing a startup is also a lot about trying things which kind of fit your phase or your stage.
That's an interesting point. So you were always in a state of trying to getting better. Getting better means like generating more output or like helping the people to generate more output. Mm-hmm. So what were like the magic, like what were the best things which worked for the small teams and then like for the big ones?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a good question, really. I think there's a few buckets you need to solve, and I think one is communication, where the tools change. You know, from, as I said, the daily stand-up, the all-hands meeting, and so. Then you probably need to start implementing HR processes for the people, so a certain amount of onboarding, offboarding if necessary, feedback, and so on. You need to think about your leadership kind of below you. Do you have team leads, which is okay? Do you have managers who maybe lead team leads? You start having multi-step processes. So I'd say feedback, general HR processes, leadership are three of the main ones. But then those also boil down, for example, in leadership, what do you do about goals? Do you start implementing OKRs or kind of management by objectives and these kinds of things? So, there's a ton of stuff to do.
So the employees were quite used from you, like you had always new ideas, or how you introduce the change, like because people don't like normally change?
Yeah, that's true. I think you need to figure out ways of communicating it and selling it. So, I mean, one of the things which we did pretty at the end, what I really liked was calibration meetings where managers talk about the feedback they will give to the employee with other managers. And normally you have, in a manager-employee situation, you have a power balance and, you know, no one kind of questions the feedback. And this, for example, is a change which is great for employees because it makes their feedback better and more objective and more rational. It does create more work for the managers. So that's then an example of something which is easy to communicate to the team, but maybe not so much towards the managers. But then there are other examples which you have to do. And I think a lot is about over communicating, really, talking often, understanding what people's fears are and how this change benefits them. And in the end, most people, at least in the startups I've worked for, are rational, positive, happy, and so on, and don't purposely, try and prevent change.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good point. So then you moved to the whole venture side. Mm-hmm. So how did your perspective change? Like how you look on that side now?
Well, it's still a process, to be honest, because I'm now here since 7 months and I've done 2 investments, but both are still kind of under the radar. And it's very interesting because on the one hand, I still remember really well, at Hitmeister, we often only had 2 or 3 weeks of money in the bank and we're really struggling to make payroll, to kind of how can we this month pay salaries. At Wooga, it was always a bit more comfortable, but so I definitely remember the founder side and also how much work and effort you put into these meetings and how important they are. But then on the other side, now as an investor, you just see so many companies that it's hard. And what you are doing, unfortunately, is most of the time saying no, or kind of deciding to not follow on. And there are obviously companies where you think, oh, okay, this is kind of crap, but then there's many, many others where you actually know people are putting a lot of good work and it's good companies, but which for whatever reason don't fit the fund's investment criteria.
And do you give them like also always feedback, or is there also no time for that?
I try and give feedback if it's helpful.
Okay.
I mean, it's always a question of time as well.
Yeah.
But I try and be respectful and also give feedback, and especially to make it very clear that that when we decide to maybe not further pursue an opportunity, it's based on 1 or 2 meetings and seeing the slides and so on. And it could be that we're completely blind and dumb.
Yeah. It's probably really hard for you guys as well if you don't really work closely with the founders all the time to know if it's a good team.
Well, you always have this fear, and am I missing something, and will I in a year or 2 kind of really kick myself because I missed something? Yeah.
Awesome. So if you would need to give advice for someone who want to follow your journey, like the same, like starting a company, then going into management more, and then like going to ventures, what for advice, for tips would you give for each stage?
Well, I mean, I think founding a company is the only thing people should be doing out of university.
Okay.
Because, I mean, if I remember back to the time, in the end, my colleagues and I we were always really afraid of failing, especially as we had a team and we had commitments and so on. On the other hand, as a founder straight out of university, cheap apartment, no children and so on, it was often for us that we didn't pay our salary and if you're out of university, you can find ways to survive. And I learned so much, especially in the initial years. I think there is no other place where I could have gotten that. And it is an emotional roller coaster. So the ups are much higher than anywhere else, and the lows are much lower.
Yeah.
But I think when you're young and hungry and cheap, it's a perfect time to do that. And then I think at Hitmeister, having built the company from 0 to 60 people, and then we also had to do layoffs and then kind of rebuild again and so on. I think that I learned quite a bit there also about management and building companies and so on, which then allowed me to take the job at Wooga. I think senior management, in my opinion, also has a function of experience. It's not only, smart and aggressive and so on, but it's also a function of experience. Once you've fired an intern, fired an employee, fired a team, it's things you learn from and you try and do better the next time. So I think that was then helpful. And then the step into venture capital, I think, it's an interesting one because it's such a different job in a way. And if you look at Holtzbrinck Ventures, I'd say about half the people have an entrepreneurial background, and the other half have a more banking/consulting background. And then some have been in the fund their whole professional life, while others are relatively fresh. And so there's actually a quite diverse set of backgrounds of the people represented here.
How can you be in an investment fund your whole professional life? Like, is it like just a skill in itself you can learn just out of university to measure companies if they're good or not?
That's a good question. I mean, we have an example, David Kucek, who started as an intern and is now a general partner here at Holtzbrinck Ventures, and he's found some very, very good companies.
Okay.
Flixbus is one of his big investments, for example.
Yeah.
And so it seems to have worked.
Until now, good choice.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is, I got like also the advice that you should go first in a kind of mid-sized company to get like work experience, to understand like the market better, and then like you find better loopholes with the market out of university. Especially for getting the market to know, like how was your approach there, guys?
We had no clue coming out of university. I mean, we had I had done an internship I'd done a couple of startup internships and then also an internship at a VC fund. So I also kind of knew how to organize money. So I'd say a few good internships are cool. Yeah. But in my opinion, if you know the industry you want to be in, then that's quite smart and devious, to kind of already go in there. You could consider doing an entrepreneur in residence program at a startup, something like that. But I'd say always, we talked about this earlier, I think just trying and starting and doing and failing and learning is often more helpful than anything else.
Good advice. Did you read a lot during this time, or like got feedback a lot from outside, or how did you educate yourself?
It's a good question. So what I did, especially at Wooga, but also at Hitmeister, but even more at Wooga, here in Berlin, we kind of founded a self-help group, and we had 3 COOs, Nikita from Delivery Hero, Mark from SoundCloud, and me from Wooga, which are completely different companies, but also facing, in a way, similar challenges. And so obviously Nikita, much more operations and sales. Mark was always very, very good from SoundCloud on HR topics, for example, and feedback, and also international because they had so many offices really early. And I learned a lot from there. So what I would recommend to any entrepreneur is find a circle of people you trust, and then consider setting up a format. Because just learning from other people's experiences is the best you can do.
How did you meet them? Like, how did you get in contact with the other CEOs?
So that was actually, I think Mark set it up from SoundCloud. Yeah. And it was cool because the format we had is we went for long lunches, like 1.5 hours, but every lunch had a topic. And so via email before we would say, okay, like what's the problem you're facing? And then maybe I need to set up a new feedback system, or I need to understand how to manage an office in the US. And then we would have a topic, and then everyone kind of discusses that topic.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so not random, but like well prepared in a way.
That's pretty cool. Awesome. So, do you do the same now as venture capitalists invest? Did you you still meet the same people, or did you got new people which are more in the investment?
You mean for my personal mentoring, or for? Yeah. So I try and it's an interesting question. I talk to other VCs, more experienced ones, both internally, of course, but also externally. There's among venture capitalists, it's an interesting problem because we do everything from seed until Series C, but typically we would do like Series A stuff, and then you have seed funds who come before us who we work with, and then we work often with larger funds later for the later rounds. But then you also have a competition, of course, around deals, around the hot next new thing. So on the one hand, there is a lot of coffee meetings and so on happening. However, maybe I should set up a self-help group like that again here in Berlin.
Yeah, I just know from some people, from some CEOs, that it's kind of sometimes normal that you talk to your competition and also exchange ideas sometimes with competition, or with close competitions, or
I think as a VC, almost more other way around. You also have to sometimes at conferences and so on, watch out to not speak too much to other VCs. You
Yeah.
need to be out talking to founders, to business angels, and so on, and not talking to other VCs.
Correct. So, what you would say is the biggest challenge you're facing today?
Well, to me, it's, in venture capital, it's always deal flow. Finding the right teams in the right moment when they're open to raising money, but they're also ready to raise money. And Holtzbrinck sees between 3,000 and 4,000 business plans per year. So it's less a quantity thing. But, what I often think about is, how can I focus my time and my effort and make sure the people who are out there know me, but then also I know about them, and the stars come together at the right moment. And some things, for example, what we're also discussing internally here quite often is how can we take some of the randomness out, because right now it seems a bit random.
Random of applications or random?
Random. It can be a bit random that it happens. It's a bit, I don't know. It's a long time ago for me, but, a bit like dating. You happen to be in that bar at that day and stand at that moment. And then shouldn't there be a more formalized way of finding companies, finding VCs, matching interests?
What do you think about Tinder for startups?
Yeah. Yeah, stuff
like a swipe right can be really jackpot.
Let's say, when we, the first investment I did, without going too much into it, but, it's like 3 guys and an idea, and it was quite early for Holtzbrinck, but then, it caught my attention, but then I also got good references on the team and so on, but it was a bit of a coincidence. And actually, my old COO side would like to have it less of a coincidence, but then maybe it has to be.
That's an interesting question. Like, how is it? Like, is it completely your responsibility, or you need to check back? Is it like corporation, like altogether, or how does this work from responsibility side for investment of?
You mean within Holtzbrinck Ventures? Yes. So in the end, as a member of the investment team, I obviously look at new ideas the whole time, new business plans. And then when we go deeper into the due diligence, I try and involve colleagues who maybe have specific knowledge. And then once I want to do something, then I can recommend it as an investment. And then the fund makes the decision to invest.
Okay, so you just recommend it and then like a whole round at the sides? Or
yes. Yeah.
Okay. You're not part of the round anymore?
No, obviously we're part of the discussion.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is, Holtzbrinck has a large fund, but on the other hand, we're not a spray and pray investor. So we commit very significant amounts of money to every company. Yeah. And so it's not just me kind of making a decision.
Yeah. Yeah. So the decision process also not changed with the sum of money, or is there like a difference between like the early stages and the late stages, or is it like always the same?
The due diligence gets deeper if there's more questions, and if it's a super early seed topic, no one. What do? You find out about the founder, you kind of know the broad market and so on. But, if it's a big investment in a later stage company, you have more numbers, you have more expertise and so on. So it moves from PowerPoint to Excel, if you will. Okay.
So, and what you would advise someone like he wants to become a venture capitalist, like what would be the way to do that?
Well, first figure out why you want to become a venture capitalist. Because, I really, really like my job, but it's very different than an operator role, and be aware of the differences. And then there's not that many positions for this kind. There's not that many people doing it. And in the end, from what I understand, my partners here at Holtzbrinck liked was the combination of entrepreneurial experience and investing experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very good combination nowadays if you want to go into venture capital.
Yeah. So what would be the way to go if you say, I want to become a manager of a certain size of company? Like, how would you do that?
You mean like similar to Wooga?
Yeah.
Well, I think the gamble which paid off for me at Wooga was joining a company of 30 people, which was even a little bit smaller than Hitmeister, but kind of having a strong feeling that it will grow.
Yeah.
And then obviously doing a job which was at least good enough to grow with the company and kind of stay in that position. Because, I mean, I don't think, you know, as the managing director of Hitmeister with 60 people, you know, I don't think anyone would have given me a 300-person company to run.
Yeah.
Or at least, well, maybe, you know, with a lot of trust, but probably not.
Yeah.
And so I think luck is actually part of it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But then also selecting, you know, I mean, I stayed for 7 years at Hitmeister and 7 years at Wooga, so I didn't jump a lot.
Yeah.
But, you know, finding good companies with good people where you have a strong feeling that they're going to grow and do well, and then grow with the company. And what I found always interesting was to also the relationship between the Jens, the CEO and founder, and me as COO. You know, to I think what was always good is that we were good at different things, and so we could work very well together as a team.
Yeah, cool. So the last question is, if you could go back in time and give advice to your 20-year-old self or to your 30-year-old self, what would you tell?
I should have thought about this question more, Ed. I mean, I'm actually quite happy with the way everything worked out. I don't have big regrets. And I mean, I'm sure Hitmeister, we could have done things smarter. Wooga, we made a ton of mistakes we could have avoided. But they're also part of the process in a way.
Then let me ask a different question. Because you did a kind of unusual way. Like you always like straightforward, like always pushing the ground, especially like going right out to university in a startup. Did you got like pressure from outside? Like for example, from your parents who say like, yeah, you should get a real job. Like, did you got something like that from your family?
No, not really.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's not very interesting.
No, you don't need to be sorry. You need to be happy about that.
No, but I mean, what was interesting is at home, my mother was always super entrepreneurial.
Okay.
And my father worked for a big organization. So at the other end of the spectrum, kind of. But I mean, I think what was always important for my father was this get a good education, you know, so I kind of checked that. And then he said, if you have a good education, you know, you'll never starve. Yeah. Which I think it makes sense. Yeah. And then my mother was always more on the side, well, do it, you know, just go out and do.
So did you know then already that like you want to be entrepreneur, you want to build a startup?
Yeah, even during my studies. So I studied first in Marburg at a kind of state university, and then I went to HHL, Handelshochschule Leipzig. And there, I mean, the people in my class were Lukas Gadowski, you know, and people like that. And at the time, we were 40 people, and I think 6 went to Roland Berger, Restrukturierung. So restructuring, so kind of the worst of the worst, even though I'm still good friends with many. And then there was always the other block of the internet entrepreneur group. And it always fascinated me. So my internships were with startups and with the VC fund and so on. So I was always very clear I want to go into the startup space.
That's pretty cool.
And not like, I don't think I've ever worked in a large company.
You can discuss how large a freelance company is, but like getting you to the top, so that's maybe also a bit different.
Yeah, no, but I've never worked in a classical company.
Yeah. What's your favorite books? Like, what for books you would recommend for people like which are a little bit more advanced, for people which want to start out? Like, what are your favorite books?
Startup-wise?
Yeah, like all general. Like, you can also go in general.
Yeah, so I have I actually read non-fiction only.
Okay.
It's been my thing for the last year or so, and I try and I'm just super interested, which is maybe why I also like my job here so much. So I read, for example, a book on shipping containers, and the impact of the shipping container on the world was probably larger than of the internet.
Okay.
Because it enabled globalization, it enabled specialization of labor, it allowed China to grow, and so on. And I read something about power grids, or now I'm reading about how ISIS grew, you know, in the Arab world.
Do you remember the name of the books, like of the shipping container?
Yeah, example? I think it was just The Box or something like that.
It's called The Box. Okay.
I can look it up, but something like that. And then the ISIS one is something with Black Flag. Yeah.
And the power grid?
I'd have to. I'm not good with with the book titles. I'd have to look it up. But so I like reading random stuff, and what I do is I look at the reading lists of Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and so on, and then look for stuff which interests me. That's on the one side, and then on the business side, I found a few helpful books. I mean, books also age kind of quickly, but still. When I was younger, I loved the folkloristic storytelling, you know, of like how Benchmark grew. I think it was called E-Boys or stuff like that. On a more kind of practical level, this Google book, the Work Rules, I found interesting because it just explains Google HR, and then you can steal bits from it. The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is a classic one. There's one, how's it called again? Yeah, as you see, I don't remember the titles. There's one, I think, from Brad Feld on VC, kind of. It's like how to negotiate better than your lawyer and your venture capitalist.
Yeah, cool.
These kinds of things. But I try and read for fun, and my biggest fun is non-fiction.
That's cool. That's pretty interesting. Awesome. So do you have some words for the end? You still want to something you still want to say? Okay. No, not really. Okay. In general, I really try and be helpful and approachable. So if something comes out, just our email addresses are on the homepage. Just send me an email. I'll put them also in the article, so that if you want to reach Jan.
Cool.
And then always say thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.